How water scarcity is reshaping site selection in 2026. The companies still treating water as a utility are discovering too late that it's become a strategy. For companies planning new facilities, expansions, or supply chain shifts, one assumption is failing quietly that water will be there when needed. It's not. Across North America, water availability is moving from a background utility to a primary constraint, one that is already delaying projects, reshaping site viability, and introducing a new layer of risk into capital planning. Companies still treating water as a permitting step are discovering that it has become a gating factor, and in some cases, a deal breaker. The constraint is already showing up. For most of the last decade, site selection decisions were driven by labor costs, tax incentives, logistics, and energy access. Water was rarely a limiting factor. That hierarchy is shifting. According to the U.S. Drought Monitor, persistent drought conditions continue to affect large portions of the Southwest, Southern Plains, and increasingly parts of the Southeast, regions that have also seen concentrated industrial growth. The World Resources Institute estimates that more than 5% of global GDP is located in areas of high or extremely high water stress, including key U.S. corridors in Texas, Arizona, and California. The implications are no longer theoretical. In Arizona, state officials have already limited groundwater availability for new developments in parts of the Phoenix metro area, citing insufficient long-term supply. In Texas, industrial users in certain basins are facing rising costs and tighter scrutiny as aquifer levels decline. Projects that penciled out 5 years ago are now entering environments where water access is no longer guaranteed. Water has entered the capital equation. What has changed is not just availability, it's how water is being treated inside financial and operational models. Permit timelines in water-stressed regions are stretching to 18 to 36 months, compared to less than a year historically. Regulators are imposing usage caps, recycling requirements, and conditional approvals that change the operating model before a shovel goes in the ground. Municipalities are introducing tiered pricing and surcharges for industrial users. Lenders and insurers are beginning to treat long-term water access as a material consideration in underwriting decisions. The direction is early stage, but it's clear. In parallel, the EPA continues to expand its focus on emerging contaminants through efforts like the Draft Contaminant Candidate List 6, reinforcing that water risk is broadening, not stabilizing. This is a structural shift. Water is no longer an operational input. It is a constraint on capital deployment. And unlike energy, it cannot be substituted, hedged, or easily relocated once a facility is built. Site selection has already changed, quietly. The shift is most visible in high-profile projects, but it is happening across sectors. When Toyota selected North Carolina for its battery manufacturing facility, water access and long-term supply stability were part of the site evaluation. In Arizona, TSMC has faced ongoing scrutiny around water sourcing for its semiconductor fabs, which require millions of gallons per day for advanced chip production. Data centers are facing similar pressure. A single hyperscale facility can consume 3 to 5 million gallons of water per day for cooling, depending on design and climate conditions. In water-stressed regions, that demand forces direct trade-offs between industrial growth and municipal supply. As a result, leading developers are commissioning hydrological and watershed modeling before site selection, running multi-decade water availability scenarios and prioritizing regions with stable or surplus supply even when other costs are higher. What used to be environmental due diligence is now front-end strategic analysis. The bigger exposure is what's already built. The risk is not limited to new construction, and for many operators, the more urgent problem is already in place. Facilities operating in water-stressed basins are facing increasing exposure from both regulatory and physical constraints, often with limited warning. Several Western states are advancing curtailment authority that allows regulators to restrict industrial withdrawals during drought emergencies with little notice. The Southeast is following a different path to the same problem. Rapid population growth is putting pressure on aquifers and surface water systems that were previously considered stable. In parts of Georgia and the Carolinas, water availability is emerging as a limiting factor for continued industrial expansion, not because of drought, but because demand has quietly outpaced recharge rates that no one was watching closely enough. For operators in both regions, the gap is narrowing between what a permit allows and what the underlying water system can actually sustain. Facilities that haven't reassessed water intensity, reuse capabilities, and contingency planning in the last 2 years are operating on assumptions that no longer match the environment they're in. These are not sustainability decisions. The companies treating water as a strategic constraint are already adjusting, and the way they're doing it makes the stakes clear. They're auditing water intensity at the process level, identifying high-use operations where reduction is technically feasible and financially material. They're investing in closed-loop and reuse systems, particularly in manufacturing environments where water can be cycled multiple times before discharge. They're embedding water risk into capital planning models. Building scenario ranges around drought conditions and regulatory tightening, the same way they model energy price volatility. And they're engaging with water authorities and municipalities early, before permit applications are filed, because operators who show up with a relationship get faster and more predictable outcomes than the ones who show up with a timeline already running. In some cases, companies are also reconsidering geographic concentration, shifting water-intensive operations to regions with more resilient long-term supply. These are not sustainability initiatives. They are operational and financial risk decisions, and the companies making them are doing so because the alternative is discovering the constraint after the capital is already committed. The decision window is closing. If your organization is evaluating sites, expanding operations, or consolidating supply chains in the next 12 to 24 months, water availability is no longer a variable you validate at the end of the process. It determines whether the process works at all. Water availability isn't becoming a constraint. It already is. The only question is whether your capital planning reflects that before or after it costs you. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.